Via Skype by Executive Director of the Afro-Middle East Center, Naeem Dina. Naeem, thank you so much for joining us. Now, let's look at how this attack took place. I mean, it was close to the presidential palace as well as close to the foreign embassies. How did they get past security?
Well, this is, I think, the big question that Afghan police, etc., are going to try and figure out. Because the area where the blast took place, as you said, houses a number of embassy, of course, the Indonesian, Turkish, Iranian, UAE embassy, all in that in that little area. So, and the security in that area is very high. Vehicles coming into that area searched, etc. But this huge bomb was smuggled in a sewer truck, and the fact that it didn't get found out before it got to that area, I think is a big security breach, and is going to be one of the issues that's going to be looked at.
Islamic State has claimed responsibility for this attack. Now, elsewhere, we're now seeing a rift developing between Europe and the US in several fronts. Do you think this is something that terror groups like ISIL will look to exploit?
Well, of course. I mean, for a group like the Islamic State group, any kind of division among what it regards as its enemies would be useful. But Afghanistan is not, for the Islamic State group, is not just a place where it can undertake operations to cause divisions among its enemies. It intends to actually take over territory and control territory in Afghanistan, and so we've seen over the past few months a number of similar attacks, although this was much larger than previous ones. Including one at the beginning of this month. They want to take territory, and you know, the fact that the Taliban control now about 40% of the country means for ISIS that they can also stake their claim in some of their territory, and some of that they will try and take from the Taliban as well.
I mean, speaking of the attack that we saw in Manchester most recently at that Ariana Grande concert, now, reasons behind why these incidents and these bombing attacks are escalating?
Well, there's different reasons. I think, as I said, in Afghanistan, it's about you know, the capturing territory and controlling areas there. In some of the European countries, it's about striking at an enemy that is attacking ISIS forces in Syria and in Iraq. So we've seen attacks taking place in France, for example, and France has been bombing ISIS targets for close on to 2 years. We see this attack taking place in Britain. And so it's about attacking your enemies in their home areas. But it's also, of course, as with terrorist attacks generally, one of the objectives is to create a kind of climate of fear and to ensure that the name, image, etc. of the organization remains foremost in the minds of people. So a country like Britain has now gone into full alert. The newspapers are full of stories about ISIS. There's a general kind of state of fear that has been created after that Manchester bombing, and that really is what the objectives are.
And you speak of, you know, the general state of fear that's been created, I mean, throughout Europe. We've seen it in the States as well. Let's look at possible interventions. I mean, we've seen the UN Security Council speaking. We've seen the biggest economies in the world coming together and trying to find solutions. Where to from here?
Well, there's a couple of things. I mean, firstly, of course, there's a military battle that is taking place, and ISIS is a very effective military force, and to defeat it, it will have to be defeated militarily. But secondly, that the flow of recruits to ISIS, because a big part of the ISIS fighting force, but also a big part of the ISIS infrastructure in terms of all its other activities, whether it's kind of state building activities, teachers, engineers, etc. A big part of that comes from outside of the areas that they control in Iraq and Syria. So apart from military intervention, the other part, of course, is to stem the flow of recruits to ISIS. And doing that, I think, certainly in European countries, there's a number of levels at which that has to be done. Many of the recruits to ISIS are attracted to the organization because of what they face in their own countries. In particularly, I'm talking about Europe and North America. Marginalization in various parts of Europe, Islamophobia, xenophobia, etc., that is faced by people. And if those issues are not addressed, then whether it's ISIS or another similar group, these groups will be attractive. Secondly, that many of the recruits of ISIS, of course, respond because of what they perceive, whether it's real or not, what they perceive as their own countries, Britain or France or whatever it is, their own countries' foreign policies, and the manner in which their countries are involved in attacks on, in this case, various Muslim countries, whether it's Iraq, whether it's Afghanistan, Palestine, whatever the case might be. And so certainly re-looking at those kinds of issues, the issues around foreign policy of these countries, is part of how this kind of recruitment might be addressed. So I think it's these two levels that have to be dealt with. One is the military, the other is the recruitment. The third, of course, is funding. But at the moment, ISIS is to a large extent self-funded.
Naeem, just finally, it's been 16 years since Washington got entangled in Afghanistan. Is America winning the war against the Taliban in that country, let alone groupings like ISIL?
No, certainly not. I mean, you know, at its height, the United States had about 130,000 troops in Afghanistan. Today, they have between 8,000 and 9,000 American troops, total of less than 14,000 NATO troops. So that's around 10% of what it had at its height. Today, the Taliban is controlling about 40% of the country of Afghanistan. So the notion that they might be winning the war against the Taliban is false. But I think that there needs to be a deeper kind of reflection on this. The United States should be not be asking the question, can we win the war against the Taliban, but they should be asking the question whether there actually should be a war against the Taliban. I mean, many Afghan politicians themselves have said that their preference is to find a negotiated settlement with the Taliban, and I think that is possible. There have been attempts. Qatar has been involved in some. Afghan politicians have been involved. But as long as those who are, in a sense, pulling some of the security and military strings in Afghanistan, like the United States, like NATO, as long as they're not willing to talk to the Taliban, I think we can expect that this is going to go on for a long time. I mean, they control almost half of the country. You can't simply wish them away, and you can't think that with 10,000 or 15,000 troops, you're going to defeat them. Those 15,000 troops, even if, as the Americans are saying, they want to increase their troop numbers, that less than 14,000 NATO troops will go up by 2,000 or 3,000. Even if it goes to 20,000, at some point they will withdraw. The Taliban are there in Afghanistan. They're not foreign troops. They're going to remain. You know, unless a political solution is found, there isn't going to be a military solution, and they will continue taking over territory and then controlling that territory in ways that perhaps many people around the world and in Afghanistan are not happy with.
Naeem, we'll have to leave it there. Thank you so much for joining us on SABC News. That was Naeem Jina, Executive Director of the Afro Middle East Center, and he was joining us via Skype.